What's good? Welcome back to Agitator. We're here and we're queer with Amir and Pierre, the editors of Inversion.
No, no, we're gonna do. I'm sorry, I have to derail this straight away. I mean,
No, no, no. I
some
like
of
it.
us
I like
might be
it.
queer, but definitely not we.
He was saying that
No,
and
Namaan.
laughing at us, which is good. It's a good start.
we're abolishing the Q word.
When I abolish the family.
So
Oh
what
no.
so Inversion, it's a I find it's a very prescient book. Uh it's Gay Life After the Homosexual is the subtitle, an anthology of essays written by gays and uh just all about the I from identity to aesthetics to history. I mean, there's a lot in here that is enlightening, I think dangerous in a fun way, necessary for, the for saving y'all's culture. But I'm
Is this how you
curious.
normally start this podcast? Is this? 'Cause I'm not entirely sure we know what we're doing at this stage. You said you would ask Amir to explain to lead us in. Maybe you should just do a takeover of your podcast, Kelby, and
Yeah.
it's
So Amir, why did you ask to be on Agitator?
Well, I wanted to be an agitator because I thought, and I don't think I'm mistaken, that we should be on a podcast which talks about culture, about literature as well, and that goes kind of I don't know I don't know if I'm going to be stupid by saying this, but I wanted us to be a bit the bad boys of the gays, and I wanted to come here to talk to you guys, and also now I'm because both you and Pierre have like a distinct accent, so I don't know which one to copy because I'm an obsessive copier, so I might say like all y'all and be oh dude, please dude, I'll do some combination of the two.
right. I'm going to.
And I sent you the book. I was trying out, and you were interested, and then you read it, and you said you were having a ball. I don't know what that means, but so I said, "Oh, good. I was on the right track." Was I, Kelby?
No, absolutely. I'm extremely heterosexual, so this is outside of my it's more just interest of fellow man than it is of, anything that I have a personal connection to. But uh definitely have seen, Agitator has a strange relationship with gays. We kind of have a large gay following, but it's the sort of right wing perfume nationalist kind of variety.
Yeah.
And the the only way I can sort of interpret how that came to be is there's a weird sort of like following the trajectory of homosexuality in America. At least there came a point where as soon as gay hit mainstream, actual gay started getting like pushed into this like
Mm.
old hat conservative, you know, box. And uh and then suddenly all the gays are kicking it with just the normal folk who have become the outcasts of society by
Mm.
just being fucking, regular. But at the same time, I can imagine that doesn't make any sense to, the gay is still gay. And it's
Is
like,
it? Is it? I'm going to compliment Gilby. I'm so sorry that you're straight. Well, congratulations, whichever way you look at this. But what you just said is sort of more perceptive than many of the responses that we got or hoped to get. So Inversion is, as you said, a collection of essays. There's 11 writers who cover all sorts of politics, but who we brought together because they've understood that something has shifted, and that shift has been incredibly long in the making. It's, partly to do with the invention of queerness, which is now a project that's been going on for 40 years, but also a much more recent kind of mainstreaming of all sorts of quasi-homosexual, quasi-gay, quasi-queer cultural artifacts. The fact, that we're all born this way, that we have to fly pride flags over absolutely everything. And noticing on the one side that the culture of gay, culture of queer has become entirely commodified and it's completely brain rotten and it's dominant to the extent that nobody actually wants to take any control over it. It's become this kind of major force that capital just finds, or or ideologues find is very useful to push around. That the other thing that you also put your finger on is that there's another type of a gay man, more often than a woman, who is quite happy to play with right-wing tropes. Um, and there's sort of a gap in between. It's very strange to think that a sexual orientation, if that's how we think about homosexuality, that would produce these kind of two cultures, and either mindless replication of, like when everyone just sort of essentially becomes the NPC meme in themselves, or they also become sort of a caricature where we all have to be super based, we have to be anti-trans, and we have to get completely consumed by that. So Amir and I got together and tried to find a way to go through all of these questions in sort of long form and without necessarily, figuring out which political side we should end up on, even though I would suggest I mean, there's only one side in which things can end. Um, but yeah, that was kind of the gist of what we were trying to do. And the reason we decided to do it in book form is that we tried to have these conversations with gay men live, with people who were sort of generation and a half older than us, and we're finding that they would just never admit to anything. Like, always we always either fall for the kind of very simple things, like, yeah, let's all be super based MAGA, and then we'll let that consume us, or we just pretend that nothing is wrong. And as many things, homosexuality has been cracking up because it's mainstream, it's big, it's inconsistent with itself. Yeah.
And it's largely sexless now. All the teeth have been ripped out along with all of the cum with
Yeah. I mean, Amir, should I out you? Where were you just before? Why were you late for this recording?
Well, I was late because I had to get a gonorrhea shot, so some of us are still having it.
hell yeah.
And let me tell you something. The gays, they don't even, like I said, listen, I think I should get because somebody, whatever, whatever. And he said, fine, I'll just give it to you. They don't even test anymore because they said, I know you. And so they just give you an injection in my butt, so it kind of hurts sitting down. But you know
Oh.
what? No, no regrets, right, Pierre?
What are you saying exactly? I'm above reproach in any of this.
Um, you know what? Something Pierre kind of, I think, touched upon, or I imagined he did. And you also mentioned about the right wing kind of gay readership you have, listenership. And for a long while, I thought that one of the most interesting things that are happening in gay culture today is this kind of opening up to right wing, either right wing aesthetics or actual right wing ideology. Even though, and this is what connects to what Pierre said, there is the cliche of right wing thought as opposed to left wing, is that the right wing, let's call it, blame the other outside, and the left wing always looks inside what's wrong with me. But the left wing gays have, for since I guess the 70s, I don't know, never could never look inside like a proper left winger, right? Saying the problem is in my community. I need to get better. I'm doing this and that. And they keep on throwing everything outside. So I guess there's something inherently right wing in homosexuality, in
Hmm.
queerness, even, okay? Not necessarily homosexuality, but today's political gayness.
I think that's quite a big claim you're making, Amir, and I think
You're
it would be
welcome.
interesting to take it to some conclusion. there's something, if you think about the aesthetic angle, for instance, just to start with, what a model, or rather the thing that made us think of a book at all was that we couldn't think of a text like this since Mark Simpson's Anti-Gay, which is a collection of essays he edited in the mid-90s. It's very lefty in a sense, that book, isn't it? It's a critique of the pink pound, i.e., it's anti-capitalist in some senses. But what's really interesting about it is that Mark Simpson is also the man who coined the term metrosexual. So he's sort of responsible for an aesthetic trope that became later David Beckham, the well groomed but very straight, very heterosexual man. He sort of presciently calls the sort of long housing of all masculinity. So that's very kind of counter cyclical terminology that I'm using now. But you compare that kind of imagery, the projection of all men becoming a sort of this gay stereotype, even though the stereotype, of course, have some kind of variety in them. There's the kind of Jim Bunny versus the disco clone. We have someone else. We have Ran Hilberun discussing this in the book. There is some kind of variety, but if you try to look back and see what the gay trope really looks like, until very, very recently, it's like all gay male bodies are essentially your kind of Leni Riefenstahl kind of bodies in the sense, yeah. To the extent that when BAP occasionally did post a thirst trap on Twitter, it's exactly in that mode. So we're in a kind of weird situation where to to think about homosexuality in any sense that connects to vitalism is already right-wing coded. And what can we do about this? We can resist it like a leftist, or we can think about it and enjoy enjoy the workouts. Oh, Amir, again, this is Amir. This is for you. This is what you do at the gym, no?
Yeah,
This is your day job.
my day job, I'm a trainer. So yeah, I gotta use all my fast energy and tell people to do better. They have to do better and educate themselves.
Oh God.
But Kelby, so when I gave you the book, so you got a book like 11 essays about gays, and you were like strict homosexual, sorry, heterosexual. So
Okay.
what were you expecting and what did you get?
I was pleasantly surprised because we get, Agitator is a podcast that started in kind of like talking about anime and the films of Takashi Miike, but me
Mm.
and my co-host who started it, he's not here because he's having gay sex. He we we're also writers and have been in the indie publishing world for, you know, the majority for I don't know, 15 years now. Um and so a lot of our conversations revolve around writing and stuff, and then so we attract a lot of people in publishing, writing, etc., and we get cold emails all the time about, I've got this, I've got that, and I read them, I look at them because you never know what you're going to get pleasantly surprised by. And I don't read all the books, but I'll read the emails. And a lot of things no, no, that's not going to make a good episode, or no, you clearly don't understand what we're about. But when yours came through, I thought at first, seeing the rainbow colors on the book, I was like, oh Lord. And then, but reading more about it, uh, I was like, no, this feels like a good fit. I think this dude actually meant to send this to us, and I was I was pleasantly surprised and honored, actually,
What?
that you'd want to come on the super straight agitator platform to.
I mean, we're straight. Don't get, this is just money.
Okay. Okay. Oh, exactly right. Yeah, because there's so much money in independent publishing. Hey, the,
Yes.
the the rainbow on the cover is so subtle and it's so anti-rainbow. Um,
I mean, but
I
Pierre,
mean, the kind of
Pierre and I both have a very difficult reaction to the rainbow flag. And we were both surprised that when the guy who did the design kind of offered this design for the cover, and we're like, okay, this is interesting. It kind of somehow fits, it kind of inverts the rainbow flag to a
It's
degree.
I don't want to say sinister. It's subversive,
Yeah,
you
it
know.
is also kind of sinister, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I mean, you're allowed to do
Yeah.
that, right? The sinister gay is a classic trope.
Yeah, I
So
mean, you're allowed to do, well, we got a hell of a lot of pushback for this. So look, there's a couple of like major points of contention that I think people get upset by. I mean, we say a bunch of things about homosexuality, and I'm going to come back to why this is perhaps upsetting for a wider culture, maybe why it might be interesting for you. So we talk about sort of the death of the transgressive gay. We talk about gays becoming normies, which maybe is a loss to some culture. You know, we used to have, I don't know, exciting writers, subversive filmmakers, and sadistic fashion designers, and now we just all do fucking marketing. You know, it's really, really boring. Still deception, but it's not particularly interesting, I would suggest, and not a good reason to kind of go and plow billions of dollars into progressive, flag waving if that's what we get at the end. Um, we sort of bemoan the lack of political conversation. We bemoan the the kind of deception of an LGBTQI community. I mean, I'm not going to list all the essay titles right now. Maybe we'll get to all of this. But the kind of fundamental reason why a text like this is taboo, I mean, I don't mean that as glibly as it sounds, is that there is a way in which homosexual culture and the homosexual subject sort of precedes what happens in other aspects of culture. Yeah, so if you think historically about the sort of twinning of gay liberation and women's liberation, they happen almost at the same time, and it's the gays who are sort of punished for it instantly. I mean, by the AIDS crisis almost. So it's like punished in a serious sense as opposed to just a societal sense. And then we have sort of engagement with historical developments like the development, for instance, of dating apps. You know, it was never going to work for women. You know, Grindr was going to be sort of just insular thing, but of course it takes over. And now all of culture is like this. We got gay marriage, just as marriage as an institution stopped meaning anything to anyone, so that we were the only people defending it, i.e., changing it, destroying it. And I do mean that quite profoundly. You know, both obscene and kind of functionally a silly thing to be happening. So why is saying anything bad about any aspect of gay forbidden? It's because it essentially leads to critiques of much broader forms that have spread in wider society. That are both institutional and cultural and the sort of ideological. Yeah, and I have to say, it fucking sucks to be, of the generation we are. I mean, looking at you and your lovely fireplace behind you, Kelby, you look a tiny bit younger than us, or significantly younger than us. But we're middle-aged and sort of not. It feels like having drawn a short straw, but being like completely free from our early teenage years on to do whatever the hell we wanted, only to find out as we grow older that all our freedoms have left to like ruining it for everyone in our wake, not just gay men, but like almost everyone. Even though this is obviously a performance, I'm prostrating myself on my shoulders, on my head, the decline and fall of Western civilization. But yeah, but there is an element in which that is true.
where there's a lot to unpack there.
Go on.
What do you think is I mean, the real core of gayness then is we've gotten so far away from it's
Mhm.
just infected everything now that um if you were to correct course, where would that direction be heading in?
That's a kind of a hard question, actually. Freya probably has an answer, but it's a bad answer.
I'm all
Um,
for entertaining.
can I ask Kelby, when you say gay, what do you mean? Are we talking about like gay sex, or do you mean like the gay, how gays kind of took over culture and the gay
Well, I guess,
sensibilities took over culture?
yeah, I guess it make it, everything's become hard to have that conversation or even understand where to start with it because so much has become gay that it's like, isn't gay just having sex, like dudes having sex with each other, or is it not? And is it a yes and or a well, yeah, or kind of thing? You know what I mean? I would think that
Which one
gay
is it for you?
gay is
What
dudes
does it mean
having,
for you?
gay is
Let's
dudes
do
having sex.
psychoanalysis on the look, but
To
this is the damn problem, unfortunately, and it's a problem again, which I think we proceed in our terminology, our sexual development precedes. So inversion is, of course, a slightly archaic term for describing the sexual act between two men, and the inverted partner is the one who turns himself conceptually into a woman. I mean, like it's fucked up the ass. I guess that's what it means. But this is how, at a certain point, homosexuality was conceived on. The word homosexuality itself is a late 19th century invention, and it comes from psychiatry. Gayness develops in the 20th century. Queerness, finally, contrary to what people would, quite a lot of right-wing commentators, and it's fucking annoying. When they say that queerness is something that was just developed in critical studies departments 5 years ago, it's not true. This is sort of a reaction to the AIDS crisis in many senses when men want to separate themselves from the sexuality. So the reason that I've brought all of these into one plate is that we have definitions that are internal and external at the same time. Some of them make pretense to being essentialist in that kind of supposedly very neat sense, yeah, that we can think homosexuality, it's got the word sexuality in it. Turfy gays, of which I am one, but turfy gays have this propensity today to say, no, no, this is a real biological thing. I'm attracted in this way that we could, maybe find some genetic justification for. But the damning reality is that we are all determined as much biologically, or at least to some extent, both biologically and socially. And I think it would be naive at some point to completely discard the queer term, the fact that what like almost quarter of the US Zoomer populations now identifies as queer without necessarily saying what the hell that means. Does that have anything to do with sexuality? Well, Amir and I and our writers who are not all the same age as ours, but I think all the younger ones sort of come across as quite middle-aged in that sense, so which is okay, which is
Sure.
good. I think we would probably make some claims on what you put as just dudes having sex with dudes. But of course, that means other things. That does mean social things. So for one example, Roger Lancaster, who is a generation older than us, his specialism is sort of class relationships, homosexuality, and Latin America, Central Latin America. So he writes about how sexuality manifests itself as essentially a series of pretenses, class aspirations, and certain kind of codes of belonging. He does it in better language than I'm being able to do now. So if we give any primacy to the fact that sexuality overlaps with other things, we already in this kind of complete sea. We can't undo this. So from that perspective, I sort of like the attraction. I see the attraction of the right wing perspective in which for heterosexuals we have this marriage. You do whatever you want to do behind closed doors. Don't bring it in. Maybe we'll give you a therapist or a pill, but keep it quiet. But the moment that you allowed gays to, like in public, explain that sex makes you think that way, sex makes you want to do those things outside of the bedroom, it's very difficult to put that back in. And God, it's quite annoying, a lot of it.
But Pierre, also, I mean, if we don't want to go, how do you call it? I'll start again. So gayness, yeah, guys who have sex with other guys, but that would be the sex element, the pornographic element of it. In order to have eroticism, let's say, there needs to be some kind of story we tell ourselves. So at some point, some kind of story of what it means to be gay, whether in or out of the closet, whatever, needs to be told. And some of the eroticism of gayness, as we've grown up to understand it, being middle-aged gays that we are, is that it's clandestine. Is that how you pronounce clandestine?
Mhm.
Hmm.
So that it's, yeah, it's secret, it's kind of taboo, it's bad. And the story continues to kind of, you know, grow as you progress in your sexual awakening or whatever, all that stuff. Um, I think one of the problems for me with gay culture that we've talked about before, like gayness, that everything's becoming gay, is the story of the eroticism at some point has started to come from without, not from the gays themselves. It seemed to come from like big institutions or something and kind of killed the eroticism of it. Okay, so, and I can see that I'm not Pierre represents the intellectuals in this talk, and I'm going to be like just the gym queen. But I do. I'm a big reader. I watch movies. I'm very interested in culture and art, and you can see this lack of eroticism spread from, I'd say the early 2000s almost, but you can say 2012, 2016. Something has been completely desexed, if you can. I can say that in culture, and not just when talking about sex, but about everything else.
Yes, no, 100%. And I think that's where a lot of the common divide or uh, a lot of the commonality, like how I was saying, for the modern right wing and then gays somehow kind of started mingling together is because
Mm.
not I can't stand the phrase everything is political, especially in relation to art, because that's not where any of my creativity sparks from. I never have anything big to say. I don't give a shit. Uh, but in hearing, it's just unlocked something for me. Reading, it kind of subconsciously did, but you just articulated it in a way that makes so much sense. It's like everything might be sexual because the where that shift happened with gay culture, it affected everything. It wasn't just this, you know, mainstreamification of or introduction of queerness and all of this.
Mm.
Art, everything just lost its teeth, lost its soul, really. And that had nothing to do with from any of my interpretation of it, had nothing to do with the war in Iraq or Obama becoming elected or this or that. I mean, it had to do with the watering down of eroticism everywhere.
I wonder if gayness, I'm kind of asking both of you, like I'm going to interview Pierre a bit. Do you think gayness is the symptom of this culture or a product or the cause of it? Like
Well,
gayness as we are talking about
yeah.
it today.
I mean, look, I made the claim earlier that it's the cause, but of course it is also by that token the victim. I'm obviously self-pitying in here. But what's quite interesting to think about the contributions in the book and people our generation is how much we have a sort of gay canon in a sense, like it's inconceivable to think of a gay man our age who didn't in some way get acculturated on someone like Genet, for instance. Like that's sort of a given. It's not that we get together and talk about Genet in clubs. Maybe they do. I don't go to clubs. Maybe this is my problem. Quite often that is the case. It's when I'm ignorant of something. Um, yeah, so the kind of desexualization. I mean, gay men continue to have sex. They continue to have quite a lot of sex to the extent that when they made it by demanding that that is a thing that society respects, they sort of demanded of the rest of the world that it condemns it. so maybe perversely, the kind of opening of the possibility of sex eroticism without a telos, in a very basic sense, the fact that anal sex doesn't produce babies. I mean, to be perfectly stupid about it, and no longer bothers having with it that kind of transgressive aesthetic charge, which, again, we can rest in Genet, but even in people like Junior Barnes, we have an essay from David Moulton, so his kind of key question is whether books can make a reader gay, and I think he concedes that they sort of do, and that it is possible to mix the erotic and the artistic in a sense that I think you were mentioning, Kelby. But that's sort of gone because now the sex no longer needs to lead to an aesthetic output. Now the kind of excess of male sexuality that used to be suppressed by, society watching over it and making the amount of space, attention, critical attention, healthcare to prevent, people dying from HIV, but not getting gonorrhea shots and so on and so on. Uh, um, yeah, that now just means that there's no need for this pointless sex to lead to anything at all. I don't know whether this is a sustainable claim, but I remember not so long ago being in a podcast with Kirak, these Dutch guys keeping it real art critics who are sort of social recordists, portraitists, they work in video, but they're also pornographers in a kind of really sleazy, unpleasant way. And their thesis is about the what is lost in art is the erotic, that we do need to bring in the eros. And for them, they're straight, but for them, the eros is aggressive in that kind of sense that we could hang on quite a lot of canonical gay literature. And we don't really have to go that far into our Western canon. When Proust writes about gay sex, he compares the sound of it to like an impression of a person being strangled by another. So yeah, there is a type for this. So once we move from that to a culture in which, oh yeah, I wrote about this. I was just remembering this as a whole essay that I have about this. We move like lube and liberation. It was called exactly the moment you invent lube, there's nothing to be gained. Sex is just too easy, too pleasant, and I think all of those qualities are at least coincidental, if not co-causal.
So it's the lube of society that we're trying to get rid of.
Oh,
Well, I
wow.
mean, we are getting rid of it, and it's sort of for the better, no? It's
I
okay if
think
people have limits. Excess freedom can't be that great for forever. I mean,
it seems to me, I'm just thinking about it now. First of all, regarding Moulton's essay in our book about whether reading makes you gay. And now that I'm thinking of it, whoever gives a better story, a better erotic story of your options in life might make you choose that one. I mean, if you have some you go a certain way, that could push you over. I mean, the story we tell, not necessarily. The thing is, I can't understand in today's ideology who would choose the story which is completely unerotic, and that made me think that um, what I can maybe make. This is another bold statement, but the connection between gayness today and the sex that gays have, which is almost purely pornographic. Pierre,
hmm.
in London, you have sniffies. What's it called? Is that what it's called?
Everyone has
Everyone
sniffers.
has it. I don't know. I
So
just
it's a sort of hookup up where the
where it's
more
like
sordid,
I'm
the
in the
more
bathroom,
sordid
in
aspect
the
of it.
bus station. Fuck me. Stuff like that, right? Anyway, so extremely pornographic, which and something about extreme liberal or contemporary culture in the West seems to be getting pornographicized. I'm sorry for my English today. I'm tired as well. And it reminds me in the days of the kind of Black Lives Matter. I'm not American, so I don't know where this is coming from so much. But people were talking about black and brown bodies, for instance, which is a completely kind of pornographic way to talk about
Hmm.
citizens in your polity, right? These bodies, and it was like the correct thing to say. And
Mm.
today, also, once in a while, I have to go to like the doctors to check about all the dripping stuff, and they never ask you. There's some kind of the way to be polite and to be inclusive is to be very pornographic in your approach. Um, M to M, did you have sex with a guy? Did you have sex with a female? Blah, 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 blah. Not a female, a woman, I guess. Anyway, so I'm thinking out loud and wasting your time, but these things kind of mesh together. And also the pornography of the lack of eroticism is what I'm crying over, I guess.
Look, but there's a turning point, and I think it's you can see it in cultural artifacts. I remember a couple of years ago, I saw an exhibition, a sort of big career retrospective of Sarah Lucas, who's one of the young British artists, that generation of late 90s London artists that includes Tracy Emin. I guess she'd probably be the best known of that lot, to American readers. And while we have this kind of impression of that time being super transgressive, super sexual, and kind of the beginning of what you're describing, the kind of everything is pornographic, everything is OnlyFans, but everything is separated from the experience. You know, that we no longer do things, we no longer have attractions, we identify as. So all these kind of euphemism. But I remember looking in Sarah Lucas's work and having finally, so late, this realization, oh, she's terrified of sex. You know, and look at Tracy Emin, it's exactly the same thing. There is there is this like openness, you know. Tracy Emin is famous for her tent with on which she embroiders all the names of people she slept with. That's actually the title of the work.
All three of
And
them. Just kidding.
no, quite a lot more. That is the whole point. I know that work burned down in a big warehouse fire. Um, and the whole point is that this is a moment of like extreme vulnerability, and they present a choice at that moment in the 90s for the culture to decide whether to jump in, tits out, and just kind of go for it, you know, follow the gay example, or whether they sort of, but at the same time they demand protection. And of course that's not the way that it went. We just went the gay way. I mean, or at least the gay way was a couple of years ahead, where we went all out for the, towards OnlyFans. I think now it will be very difficult to disambiguate those things because straight Instagram, gay Instagram, on and OnlyFans, they sort of became synonymous. It's very hard to say who leads what, which trends leads what. And I think added with, mixed with the thing that Amir alluded to, that the pornographic ideas come from outside so much. Gay, like particularly male gay pornography or cultural artifacts are scripted, written, directed by women, and it's almost funny how to think about that. So yeah, and I think that there is kind of a fundamental mistrust that has to exist between men and women, particularly straight women, and all other men, including gay men, in which it is in the female of the species in their interest to moderate male sexuality. So if we go back to the kind of longhouse discourse moment, which was maybe phrased in a silly way, but points to something that we've known for much, much longer, um, women need to find ways to control male sexuality. And what better way to control male sexuality than to make everything meaninglessly sexual? Yeah, like a point at which we no longer, it's so excessive that it's not threatening because we can interact on OnlyFans. We don't have to interact in real life. Of course, those paradigms are not evenly distributed. Fags still have a different type of sex, and now, gosh, strangely, like Britain has this very, it's so upsetting to see this, but we are having sort of like an almost migrant ethnic recognition, when we see, oh, different cultures. now that we've just woken up, that this is a very different, ethnically, culturally different country than it was 20 years ago. Oh, different cultures have different attitudes to sexuality. And of course, everyone says this, no, no, this is a right-wing talking point. Shut up, bigot. And once a week, we find that someone who's fresh off the boat has raped a school child. And you go, and okay, I'm not trying to agitate. I'm simply saying there are different cultures,
You are
and
on Agitator.
yeah, oh yeah. Well, I'm trying to agitate. Though that gets you arrested in this country, so I still have some stuff to do that I could do outside of prison. Anyhow, so I think our settlement has sort of worked so far, but it's clearly not able to absorb variations. So maybe we just need to, should we just turn all migrants gay? Is that a solution? Yeah, okay, we're doing that.
If the migration parallel is it, that makes a lot of sense too, because there's along in the downfall of Western civilization is not just a loss of eroticism, but a loss of cultural distinguishable identity where
Mm.
everyone is, the same. And no they're not. Like that's
How
just you
radical? How radical?
you the normalization of everything, the flattening of everything is just the death of all culture across the board, because then you're not allowing for the things that grate against each other. Like there's more interesting things to be found, more I don't know. Life is just more interesting when you allow things to rub against each other in the like kind of the wrong way sometimes, and not just have this blanket acceptance everywhere. I grew up in so I'm 33, and I grew up in the South. I grew up in the hood, and I grew up in clashing cultures.
Mm.
Everything was, you call your friends the N word, you call them a faggot for doing this and that. And none of us like really cared. We were forced, coming from a lower class, like, upbringing, you're forced to get along with your neighbors because that's who you're stuck with. You don't have the lot in life that allows you a choice to get into whatever party you want. It's these are the people that you have to be tight with because y'all are
Mm.
stuck in the same situation together. And so you just accept certain differences, but you dog on each other for them. And not in a way that is like, I hope you understand. I accept you and I want to understand you. It's like,
Mm.
no, you're gay, but yeah, we're cool, and,
Uh,
and
But what's the thing that motivates this coolness? Because of course there's a couple of ways to skin this banana. Don't know why that image came to me. Um, Peel. I wouldn't. Sorry, it's also evening where I am. But look, but the kind of liberal would be both the liberal and the conservative would be quite inconsistent at its appeal to sameness and difference. Yeah, you just described in a vaguely conservative way, vaguely based, as in this was the reality way, that people were different. Well, what better way to make sure that your children get to grow up in a society that has this rubbing difference than to mix it up? Yeah, like, I mean, why don't we move you to Mars and move a different and make your neighbors completely alien to you? Like, this is possible. So I think both that and the conservative counter proposal, which is, oh, back in the 1950s, where everyone knew all the neighbors, things were different. We knew which way is up. The truth is actually, I think that kind of homogeneity that we that conservative mind fetishizes, I think still exists in certain places. Like in Britain, it still exists. It's being undermined in ways that I think the word undermine is useful precisely because of how quickly things have started changing in the last 10 up to 20 years. We've got 10 million people more than we did 20 years ago. That's, and for a country the size of Britain, is no small chips. Um, but so yeah, so like the kind of the dream of a moment when the difference and coherence, difference and sameness were in a great balance. And the reality is that actually gays have had to think about this a tiny bit. So we have two things in the book that I think address aspects of this. One, I write briefly in my essay about gay communities and the impossibility of it. I write about Pim Fortuyn, who's this Dutch politician in the early 2000s who was, well, by today's standards, sort of a mild right winger. By the early 2000s standard, an outright far right bigot because we didn't have anyone to compare him with. But his platform was essentially in the Netherlands to stop migration from Morocco. And his argument was simply, we're a liberal society. We do not want to import illiberal subjects. And one of his famous quips was, I do not want to have to fight for gay and women's rights all over again. So he is 25 years ago making the call of, we're going to be colonized. Our values are going to be made subservient to another culture's values. And of course, nobody was really buying this, and he got assassinated. Um, but but it's it's humbling to think that the argument was already available to us intellectually at the time, where we could finesse what to be the same and what to be different meant. And this is where the idea of judgment that you alluded to very early on in your last the last thing you said, Kelby, which is that we have to be able to accept that things are different so that we know which things are better. Yeah, the rub needs to be there so we get to determine in which direction it goes. And the other thing that I think is interesting in the book that's also gay is that the other person who gives voice to all of this big change, is Renaud Camus, who's the author of, now known as the author of the Great Replacement Theory, the idea that Western civilization is being replaced with, well, I guess he says Islamic civilization, and then he suggests this is being done on purpose. But he was a figure of ridicule, I don't know, 5, 10 years ago. And it turns out that actually, well, quite a lot of his observations are statistically check out. And the reason that he's in the book is that he was a sort of a writer of cold gay erotica in the 1980s, sort of on the way to become canonized as the next Jean Genet, except that he was observed to break some kind of speech codes. And Oliver Davies, who writes about them, suggests that there is a link between Camus' homosexuality and his fear of being replaced by the other, which brings us again to this kind of lack of telos, lack of reproduction. And if we think about the kind of broader cultural sphere in which the attention that the gays enjoyed maybe in the mid 90s, early 2000s, like we were really, Lady Gaga was clearly like sucking the gay cock. Was she? I've never listened to any Lady Gaga, but this is something else, from another essay. But yeah, we've also been replaced in a sense, no? Like what? Like trans is the new gay. Isn't that cool? So yeah, all of this, I think it's at some point, once we acknowledge that sexuality is complicated, or we allow for it to become publicly this complicated, it's bloody twinned with absolutely everything. So we end up, despite ourselves being annoyingly intersectional, which is not something I ever wanted to be.
I think the sameness and something that what Kelby said, which connects with what you said earlier, Pierre, about in order like women that create this kind of new queer culture because they fear the sexuality of it, and then you have those kind of hashtags which we talked a lot about, like love is love. Like there's nothing different between homosexual relationships and straight relationships. They're the same, just we've got two dicks, just like, you know, there's no difference between a man and a woman. So we have this flattening, which is this fantasy of flattening. What Kelby said about, living, about life being more complicated than that, and difference is something that actually exists in real life
Mm.
is is something which is obvious, and and because we know that, we also know that this kind of project of flattening everything is not going to succeed. That was how we're feeling also this anxiety about contemporary life. Everybody knows there's no future to it, which takes us back to what you said about telos. This is no procreation here. There's no thought of the future. This grand experiment is not for generations to come.
Yep.
Gayness and culture and immigration and everything.
But
Right.
look, but this is
It's a
where the idea of the replaceable human comes from, because you can, if the subject doesn't reproduce itself, you can just keep on producing it, and we are in a sort of perfect place to see this happen. The kind of biopolitical machine in which we're living is completely geared up for that. How does that look from your perspective, Kelby? Like, is the fact that it's easier for us all to be the same? Like, is that apparent in your life?
uh I mean, my everyday life. So I work in construction
Mm,
and I always have. So I exist in a world where uh culture has been stalled for several
mm,
decades, where people still act like nobody's at the threat of losing their job for the things that they say, as long as they know how to swing the hammer. um the so there's a difference between my life and how I see things, you know, around, either how other people who don't exist in that world in my real life are, especially on the internet. um there is a separation there, which makes it even more blatantly obvious to me. When people try to say this is, you know, progressives, quote unquote, pushing this mainstreamification, normalization of everything, try to gaslight everybody into, there is no loss of culture, there is no, what do you mean art sucks, what do you mean, like,
mm,
not like, just the constant gaslighting. I can see right through all that shit, because I do have the uh sort of the privilege of my day to day looking like how I want it to, like the
mm,
way that I miss it being all around, just across the board. But I can see that for other people it is not that way. So the gaslighting, I just see right through that. Uh for But I'm also a father, so there's
mm,
the how my kids are being brought up in this new normalization of everything. Even to the point of it's Black History Month now, and we're in a place at the moment where it's there's a large Black population, and even being in such a densely Black population, my son, who's part Hispanic part white, he goes, what are Black people? It's the first time he's even like recognized, being taught about a difference, which, I
mm,
mean, it can come back to me as well, I guess, but, or for sure.
mm,
But there's a constant anxiety for me in that regard, where it's like, what are my kids going to be brought up in? Like, what I want things to, challenge them, and I want them to grow up not just, you know kumbaya thinking nothing of nobody, because I think when you accept everybody blanketly, it makes you just it makes you retarded, and it weakens your personal defenses and your own like perceptiveness, but it also just dilutes your perspective of the world, and trying to find, like, when you're trying to understand difference, you're looking for things to be defensive about, but you're also looking for the beauty in other things. You're looking for uh things that might awaken something inside of you. um there's there's no future in this flattening mainstreamification, which it has been happening, and uh causes me the most anxiety as a parent. From my personal perspective, to answer your question,
Mm.
that's where it is for me, is like, how is this going to affect how my kids grow up seeing the world? Like, what kind of culture, what is their relationship to culture going to be?
I'll tell you the most depressing thing that I can think of in response to this. One of the kind of canonical works of queer theory is No Future by Lee Edelman. And Lee Edelman talks about exactly this kind of problem that we should not be seeking to differentiate our culture, that any idea that still clings to what you just described as your desire, your anxiety, actually is already on the way out. And he essentially talks about the fascism apparent in the baby's face, that any idea for the propagation of our own choices, whether they be crudely genetic or frivolously aesthetic, is kind of a problem. But of course, he doesn't because he's not an idiot, unlike a lot of other queer theorists. He doesn't think this will take us into some kind of utopia. This is a very kind of doomer existence. So he's both promoting it and predicting it. And yeah, this I think this I think is something that so many people have articulated this very well. But again, it's very depressing how gay culture has been sort of at the forefront. If you don't develop the skills to make judgments about what is good and what is bad, those judgments can be entirely subjective if you so wish. Like there are ways to make those kind of judgments in a way that is incredibly liberal, and we don't actually have to be fascist. We don't have to make like hard and fast rules of what goes. But if after 50 years, 60 years since the sexual kind of broadening sexual revolution and all of that, our best summary is that we just don't make judgments at all, then I'm not entirely sure how we are not exposing ourselves to like complete destruction. And that I don't even have to mean it in a kind of dark forest theory. It's not that someone will come and take over us, even though we already sort of agreed that that might be happening in some senses, or at least I agreed with myself. Um, but but also, surely it only takes one actor to abuse that settlement. It only takes one agent to decide, oh, since you're not going to impose limits on what we're doing, I am going to go to that extreme. Yeah. And we have seen this in so many liberal policies. It's, oh, I guess he murders people on the subway, but have you thought of doing a housing first policy against it? So we get to the point where we are overwhelmed by problems that we as a society had reasonably good solutions for like 30, 40 years ago, and suddenly we stand completely paralyzed. And the reason I think there is a sexual component to it is because I've seen people do this. I've seen people make that claim. One of my sort of infamous clashes in a space I run in London, I screened a bunch of films by Glenn Belvorio from the mid 90s. He was a drag queen doing sort of public access television. And I guess he's only in circulation now because he's Camille Pallia's BFF, and Pallia is sort of like the base crowd's heroine now. And we screened some of the films, and one of them is this very famous piece called Glenda and Camille to Downtown, or the other way around. Um, and Palia just insists, no, we must have full liberation. Nothing must be forbidden. We must allow for all forms of deviance. And then in the Q&A, when I was talking to Belvorio, he says, well, I guess trans activists have gone too far. So that was like a very particular, and we were talking about this like, but no, dude, 30 years ago, I have you on tape, your own tape. You say that we mustn't forbid. There's no limit. How do you allow yourself now that you're middle-aged and slightly regretful but still enjoy doing being a surrogate for Camille Paglia on the international pseudo-intellectual base circuit? How can you hold these two things in your mind? Either things are better or worse, or everything is allowed, in which case you don't get to choose whether the better things or the worse things or like. I mean, I sort of labored this point, but again, it's very shameful that people who have fought for my liberation before I was even born, like I owe so many of my freedoms to people who I fundamentally disagree with. This has been plaguing me for much of my adult life, and I don't quite know how to resolve it, other than to, write a horrible book telling them all that they're awful. But
That the trans thing kind of became the nuclear bomb in all of this too, because
hmm,
it's at the same time, um of course there's, I mean, F to M, but for the most part it's another realm of male sexuality that can be
hmm,
introduced on a broader scale, because when I was growing up, the, you know, trannies were the crazy 6 foot dude in the skirt yelling on the corner at the gas station. um
where did you grow up exactly? Should we move? Like this sounds like an idyll.
yeah, yeah, hell yeah, Houston, Texas, come on down.
Oh,
But having that steamrolled out into culture, in this kind of, at the same time that, you know, gay was being overtaken by queer and metro, and then everything's being normalized in that sense, and now all of a sudden trans is in your DNA, your kid could be trans, and everything is
hmm.
just, you have to automatically accept all of this too. um
You don't have to
you
automatically.
don't.
So you don't have to, this is a very simple answer. You don't have to accept anything about anything.
No, no, but in so Amir said that you have a solution that's the wrong one, but that I'm still very curious to hear.
What's the
It's the wrong
solution?
one. I said it's a bad one.
It's a bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you deal with trans. I get invited to all these
Oh no,
events
with
when I
trans,
have to explain that I don't care about trans really. I mean, I'm a TERF, but I don't really care. So I'm here.
I don't listen. To be honest, this is a difficult subject for me, mostly because I don't care enough. I don't care. For instance, I was kind of raised as an American, let's say, in American ideologies, like you do you, and it does not bother me at all. What I did notice lately, though, lately I mean in the last 10 to 20 years, that um, let's call it that third gender of today, it's that transgenders, which used to be transsexuals and trannies, the performance of that gender, like for instance, now there will be, and I think I can say this without being transphobic because this is their language, the performance of their gender is much more middle class. Okay, so like I'm a male who transitioned to woman. I I'm wearing my thing, whatever, and I'm a middle class woman. In for instance, where I come from Tel Aviv, in the 70s, there was this French drag queen slash tranny who was called Coccinelle. She came over to Israel and it was this huge scandal and everybody was excited. And since then, that's how people call trannies here, Coccinelle. It means ladybug in French.
Mm,
So, and to be a coccinellite, okay, which is tranny, is a completely different gender role than transgender. And some of the older trannies in Israel never say, for instance, no, I'm a woman stuck in a man's body or vice. She says, I'm a tranny. It's a thing in itself. That identity itself is kind of disappearing. And I always kind of had a lot of respect for that certain identity. But on the other hand, I some people I kind of look at it because they were kind of cool and they were rough and they were street, but not everybody is cool and street, right? So people have like other people want to live middle class lives like me, right? And not be cool. But I am interested in that this gender performance of being transgender has changed in the last decade.
yeah, I
And
mean,
there's,
it plays into this idea of, eradication of difference. Somehow the project of trans became picked up by those who would like to eradicate the difference between man and woman. So well, my friend Nina Power sort of points out that we sort of become brother and sister. These are our relationships, and of course, the step further is like everyone is brother, or everyone is sort of like in the middle. So I think I think it shouldn't be unreasonable to actually find some of serious gender theorists to be upset by this, for instance. No, like why have people like Judith Butler only sort of very mutedly pointed out that this change that Amir just described, there is something completely lessened. When you impose this kind of maximum acceptance, whether it's through the automatic dispensation of drugs or through the complete sort of appeasement of the slightest fantasy of any person, you in fact deny them the possibility of performing anything at all. That means that we are suddenly the thing that we are, even though we have just sort of redesigned ourselves. And what is the experience of someone who suddenly decides that they're non-binary? Like, what has actually changed? I presume they would like to be something that they can actually fashion. And, the good old-fashioned autogynephile who in his late 40s decides that he fancies pussy so much that he really wants to have one. Like, they still get to perform that. They still get to perform that as a demand on the wife who they traumatize and divorce in many cases. But your 20-year-old non-binary person has to like hang in on cheap nonsense like pronouns. They literally they have to put pronouns at the bottom of the email. This is how they are led to understand gender. How annoyingly limiting and also how annoyingly annoying to everyone around them. I don't know how this is a development. The second question that, of course, like how do we take any non-conservative, but how do we see the position that, for instance, the Trump administration has adopted on trans, which is essentially to just turn off the tap of synthetic hormones, and that's kind of the idea, yeah, and scrub some writing from various government websites. The question then to ask is whether it is possible to like revert to a version of the human before that. It is of course possible to stop transing children. I think we should generally be for that. Um, but what does it mean to have had that kind of person, that kind of transhumanist idea in existence in our society, in our culture? There is a way in which, if we think about this as just a technology, can we imagine, for instance, living without computers? Can we imagine living without the alphabet? There are certain technologies that create a consciousness in us in every subsequent generation. So I'm not entirely sure whether it's that simple. I think we can stop at a very basic level doing harm to many individuals. But whether that doesn't in any sense revert to the idea that trans in all its different meanings has already existed, because we're not going to engage in mass amnesia, convenient as that would be for some factions.
Do you think a reclamation of culture is as simple as more and more people behaving in a manner in spite of what is suddenly deemed acceptable socially, or like do you think the reintroduction of transgressive art, the do you do you think it's as simple as more people being just like, fuck it, I'm creating in a way that I am going to create, am drawn to create uninhibited, I'm going to live my life by my own ideology, I'm going to uh run in, you know, social circles that either can go along with it or fuck off? Do you think it's as simple as a mindset, a determination, um, or do you think that this whitewashing of culture is so deeply embedded in all, you know, big institution that it needs to that almost that transgressive side would have to be the new mainstream in order to make any kind of difference.
I know Amir would like the transgressive to be the mainstream. I have a convoluted answer, but I want to hear
I
from
don't know.
Amir's.
I don't think that the transgressive cannot be the mainstream, obviously.
I mean,
But
yeah.
it has to have there is something. The problem is that the mainstream pretended transgression. Okay, it pretends that being first in trans is transgressive, that being queer is transgressive. If you put like, you wear a dress and you put lip gloss, that means you're from the LGBTQI plus community, and that's transgressive. That's one. Uh, and I'm split between optimism. No, regarding culture, I'm an optimist. I think the change is gonna come and it's happening now. Okay, it's happening right now for me personally, to imagine being in a podcast like this, talking like this in 2016, for instance, I would have been terrified, and now less so because I've met people like Pierre. I've met people who we did the book with together. So this does give energy and hope and um, courage. The bad part of this is gonna take time. The institutions that are now running us will fall at some point. They are completely inept. They have no capacity to do anything. Uh, and I think, even though I think Pierre is a bit more pessimistic regarding culture, um, I think, I wonder actually if you agree with me, Pierre, that people are getting fed up with what they're getting. People are not satisfied, which is
I think I've become an optimist this very week because I've sort of I saw a play that was based, so a Greek tragedy, Iphigenia, in which a woman makes, you know, a sacrifice for her country against the barbarians, and this was played by a bunch of 20-year-olds at a university, and nobody said it was fascist. So like this is my little experience. Look, there's a couple of things and happening, and they're different in the US, they're in the UK, they're different still in Europe. We're sort of out of sync in a way that's not necessarily exciting, but might become informative because we have that grand experiment of Trump and MAGA and its sort of lack of cultural coherence, which just sort of creates this weird, you know, the fictional garden of the 20th, 250th anniversary, some weirdo artist representing the US in Venice. Um, but also has a very interesting formulation for someone like Jonathan Keeperman about what it is that right wing can do, which is to do with reflection of reality. So things are happening in the US in a way that's worth watching because it's just big. And the pushback from the institutions that Amir describes is already quite dilute because there's been a long time that, you know, the liberal activists are exhausted in the US. They never got exhausted in the UK, but we're also seeing something else that's almost equivalent, which is that in a very simple terms, I think woke is over in the UK institutions, not because it's been replaced with something positive, but um, they're just exhausted with themselves. They can't. So I'm looking at the programs of our galleries and museums, which is what I work in, um, and they're all doing retrospective of people who were like famous 30 years ago. You know, Tracy Emin, who I mentioned earlier, David Hockney. Like these are easy populist great things, but they're not challenging in any political sense in the way that we used to be fed politicization in the arts. So that's happening within the institutions. Do I really believe in what you suggested, Kelby, about like people just saying, fuck it, I'm gonna do it my way? I have a feeling that this is easier to do in a place like the US where absolutely everything requires this attitude. You know, like if you want to survive, you have to do it. Fuck it, I'm going to do it my way. I mean, a lot of Europe is still hooked on legacy funding systems that essentially put the state in charge of this kind of stasis production. I mean, we went through sort of massive expansion post 2000s, yeah, like art and culture were the growth areas that we told all the kids that if they go to art school, the world will be a better place, not only for them, but for everyone. That's, of course, collapsed majorly. And I think we're in this kind of weird interregnum that I'm trying to work on or against, in which a lot of Zoomer culture is very inattentive to the artifact. This is not a nice thing to say about the kind of people who come to events. I have a little space called Verdun where I do cultural events and I talk to people about serious things of an evening. And a lot of them just don't particularly care whether the things we show them are good or bad. But I'm trying to inspire them to think like, well, if you think what you've written, your short story, is worth reading in front of 50 people, do you think we could spend another 5 hours making it actually worthwhile? You know, could you edit it? Could we get to that point? I'm not seeing that as an instinct. So there is something to do again with judgment that we discussed that's like almost fundamentally lost. So that's happening to the younger ones. The institutions are looking over shrinking estates. They're out of money. They can't be bothered to do woke anymore. They will probably just sort of do environmental exhibitions, but they can't do BLM exhibitions. They can't do trans exhibitions because that's like too much of a headache for how little money is left. So where is the space to be optimistic about? I think it has to be in the attitude that we discussed of fuck it, we have to do this. We have to have the courage of our convictions. And then, well, I'm going to big myself up a tiny bit. Actually, some of us need to be responsible and say, okay, let's synthesize what it is that you do. Let's institutionalize as a set of alternatives the voices that are doing something. And I don't come to this project with a lot of resources, but I know that, like for instance, in our quote unquote dissident space, which is not synonymous with the right wing and by any measure, it's quite a lot broader than this. I think we've had such a long time. It's been 10 years for anyone who is bored by mainstream institutional culture that if we spend a moment longer complaining about the liberals denying us access or the liberals making culture bad, then we're missing the opportunity. This even corresponds with like how I think about the again quote unquote crisis of homosexuality. I fucking hate this framing, but of course we are in a crisis, and the introduction of the book talks about the crisis incessantly, just as a way to explain the kind of perma crisis, which is the opposite of it. But I keep on going to events and I have to explain to these turfy gays, sorry, trans is not your problem. The problem is that you don't know what it is that you want. You don't know how to get together, to give it a voice, to give it a product. I think there are aspects of culture in which this is beginning to discernibly happen. Um, I'm trying to play a tiny, tiny part of this in my organization, but I think at some point we have to, from that kind of fuck it, I'm going to do my way, also look for what used to be the leftist prerogative, which is who else is doing the good things. And I think by default, what you're doing, the fact that we together talking, that's like a small aspect of this. The fact that you've done this, many dozens of times, that means that there is a desire. But I think as we keep going, institutions need to emerge from that. They will they will reproduce many of the problems that institutions always do, whatever ideological orientation they have. But we're a long way from that. And I think we need to also be very judicious as to where we put our energy, whether we are proposing something positive or whether it's just a pushback against the things that we don't like.
Yeah, extremely well said.
It's
And
the
I
most optimistic I've been about anything for like years. So sorry if I hope that came across in the tone of my voice for a moment, at least.
it got me fired up. I think a reintroduction of, and this is where my little part um comes in as a father is what I try to, the way I think about it. What kind of world do I want my kids to grow up in? Well, that's how I need to act as an example for them, and also raise them in a way that is, you are the future, and not just
Mm,
sort of pursue or think about uh either lament or try to transgress against the death of culture. It's and going back to the way they thought of building the great cathedrals, it's,
mm,
I'm not going to see the fruits of my labor, but hopefully my children will, or their children. But somebody needs to be getting the ball rolling in a more positive direction for that better change. And I do see, I'm an optimist as well. I see it happening, but I'm not optimistic in the way that it's like uh I'm going to benefit from this. It's more like I see things taking a turn, and I want to, I'll do my part in that, however big or small it may be. But it's just my opinion on it all is just that it's going to take humble dedication, to just that willingness to be like, fuck it. um I might not get the accolades I might have once desired. I might not see the big outcome that I dream of. It's just, let's keep pushing things in this direction, and hope for the best for the future generations, kind of thing.
Kelby, I think anyway, just like, you use the word transgression regarding culture, but what you're actually describing is like not the negative aspects of transgression. It's a true will and, let's say, desire for meaning in culture, in art, in community, okay? And things will never get to a place where everything is good. The only thing that is constant would be the desire. I think so, as long as, and I think also what Pierre is kind of talking about, I think, or what is the core of the little optimism that I also somehow, for some reason, I feel, is that I feel it is much easier now to access and accept this desire that I want things to be better, to have meaning. And it'll be, the revolution is eternal. It's not something you reach a point and satisfy.
I think that also becomes very, very simple. I think when I was, I've been institution building in a very limited way for 20 years now, but my desires when I was in my mid-20s, I opened a gallery where I think now I would describe them as leftist, even though my politics was not leftist. They were to do with this sort of the idea of progress. That yes, I was so impatient, like even when the business was going badly, for like, no, if I do it for another year, I will have enough experience in my CV to then go and be a director at a museum. Like it was this, like twinned with my personal benefit, the idea that the things that we're building were serving some kind of a very well-trodden path. And now I don't feel this at all. Like I feel completely an idea that I feel the responsibility of service. Like what can I do when I described in slightly harsh terms the Zoomers? Well, my response to that problem is to try to fundraise to create a fellowship where I can get 15 of them and train them and like see if they can be made to think in a way that I think is benefits that kind of long-term engagement, long-term building. So it does happen. I think it's sort of almost biological. Thank God there are, maybe gay men don't all have to sort of be hedonists forever. But again, we're slightly disadvantaged. We're literally the first generation to have this many of us, this out and this undead of AIDS. So, well,
Mhm.
almost the first generation. So it's kind of unclear. Yeah, but I sometimes envy the what I believe, what I imagine is the kind of clarity that something like fatherhood brings to a person. Like there's a physical demand that's just inalienable. Like you have to be this good. If you're not, well, child protection services show up in the extreme, or or you have to live with yourself. And like I've done enough. I sort of owe enough. I've done enough horrible things to the generations above me, like all the way down to like my unresolved relationship with my mother, for instance. No need for details, but like I feel bad towards the past. I don't want to feel bad towards the future. That's kind of dawned on me over the last the last few years. It's not unmotivating. I'm happy with that.
That is a I'm glad you can be at that kind of clarity, because for me that, I mean, becoming a father was that sobering moment of you know, past doesn't matter, present is, even what I do in the presence is uh based on, how my responsibility towards the future. uh you said y'all have been getting, pushback from at the beginning of this. How is so how has the book circuit in general been going, and what has been some of those I'm assuming misinterpretations, or what kind of pushback has been received?
I mean, you can cover this while I get my computer charger.
Oh, okay. Actually think there has been pushback, but I have also received a lot of kind of kind and encouraging, and so did Pierre, even though he doesn't like to admit it, kind and encouraging remarks about this book. My favorite pushback, though, and is one that we got just as the table of contents was published, like on the first day it was out. So on Blue Sky, somebody went through some kind of, I don't know, is he a professor, Pierre? Or something like a professor somewhere? Oh, he didn't hear us. Pierre, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey.
So the guy who wrote on Blue Sky about our table of contents, was he like a professor? He's like an
Yeah,
academic.
yeah. It's pig studies.
Yeah, okay. So he was like
So I'm not, I'm
writing
not, I'm not even, I'm not being facetious. He
pig
writes
studies,
about
yeah.
pig masculinities.
And anyway, he went through the entire kind of table of contents, I am assuming Googled the people to write something bad about them. Not talking, he said the book is about like the trans replacement of homosexuality, which is actually nowhere in the book, just in the podcast. And that's a joke. Anyway, I was that made me feel good because it showed me I can not take these people too seriously anymore. It was really an amazing exhibition of retardedness. What kind of pushback did you get, Pierre?
Oh no, no, we can't. We already did a podcast last week when we talked about our least favorite review, and I called the
Oh,
reviewer a loathsome fag 4 times in 1 hour. I don't think
yeah.
we need to repeat that necessarily. But like one of the critiques that I think is interesting to countenance is to do with like emotional maturity and whether it is a good idea to launch critiques at your own people. Is oikophobia as a critical discipline that useful? So one of the things that someone wrote about the book is like, well, there's nothing about romantic love in the book. These people are just sad and lonely and aging, which is true for the two of us, at least. As far as I'm aware, everyone else is having a fantastically fulfilled life and on a table of contents. But there is this kind of big question of whether the complaint that we're making, whether it is indeed generational, maybe, and this is what would render the book completely null, maybe generations after us, and that will include possibly generations even after that. That could include eventually generations of your children, Kelby. They're so completely accustomed to all of this. We addressed this earlier, but what if this is working? What if the kind of general desexualization of absolutely everything, the turning of men into women into interchangeable subjects, whether that temporarily looks okay. And I think we generally found that sort of straight women are more in favor of the book than gay men. In as much as I get to see who buys it, I mean, just when people buy the book from us directly, we get to make a guess as to the sex. Yeah, I think it's been a good like 70% women. So I'm imagining all the fags are buying the book on Amazon, where I don't get
Okay,
to
but
know
yeah,
about
also
this.
let's be fair. Women buy more books in general and read more.
Oh,
So
really? Is that it? Okay. Well, fine. Oh, fine, fine.
fine.
Then what I've said is complete waste of um,
I, you know,
no.
my reaction to the book is that in Berlin, for instance, I like don't have any friends anymore because nothing works. And after this book, especially, but people come to me secretly and tell me they read the book, they waited for this book, right? That and I'm telling secretly, I mean whispering, because in Berlin specifically, at least in the crowd in which I used to hang out or still do, these thoughts are still impossible to say out loud. Not that, and by the way, we don't say anything that, well, some stuff is a bit scandalous, but most of it is things that we all know from the inside. And all we do is we talk about it, and I think in most cases was kind of, not being too vulgar about it. I mean, I'm taking my essay away out of that and maybe some of the other essays at the end, but kind of well-mannered, well-articulated kind of critiques which are forbidden, still forbidden in certain areas, especially in the freer parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point is essentially about whether critique is something that you can do in everyday life. And as we know, if we can't say that some things are good and some things are worse than those, we
No,
can't be we
I mean
can't
we
be
can
engaging. It's
discriminate
best not
and wouldn't.
to. Yeah, and I don't think what we say in the book is particularly controversial. It's just that we live in a world where people don't like to think about who they are.
Yeah,
The kind of nice formulation what we could have started with is like if we don't want to overtly say that gays are the problem, because that's I guess that's slightly unfair. That's rigging the question straight out. Well, we want to be able to say that gays are not the problem.
they
How do
have.
you how do you invite internal critique? And every single area of practice, of course, it's questionable whether homosexuality is a thing in and of itself, but I mean, queer theorists tell us it is, yeah, like they really want to have a political thing going around it. Well, if it is a thing that has goods that are internal to it, they need to be critiqued. Um, why is the gay man somehow exempt from all of this? That's literally the most aggressive thing that we do, which is say, surely, if the Catholic Church can talk about the Catholic Church and have institutional critique inside it, what is it that we're doing that's so kind of out of bounds? So yeah, I think I've had some very nice responses, mostly from women. I have also, oh, okay, this is maybe you can help me with this, Kelby. I've been using all the podcasts we've been on to look for a wife. Can you help me with that? The
Female wife?
wife does the wife does have to be a man, unfortunately. And I sort of thought I had one. I saw him earlier today. It's never going to happen. Um, anyhow, so yeah, this is my last contribution to the discourse is that I desperately need a wife.
All right, well, you heard it here, all the fags listening. He Pierre is ready for the taking. Make him an honest man, but you,
Please.
but you got to be a man.
Uh-huh.
Well, I applaud you both in how you curated this this anthology and with and applaud everybody that contributed to it, uh who who did present these ideas in a very, like, even when I say I was pleasantly surprised, of what it actually contained versus what, just where we are right now in society, what you could expect to get out of this book. It wasn't in the opposite direction. It wasn't just this blatant, rough, transgressive, fuck you, middle finger type of thing. It's full of ideas and context and history and perspective that is presented in a way that it feels um invigorating and thought provoking and not and it's positive. It's not like
Mhm.
uh this destructive for it's dangerous. It's a dangerous book that I also applaud the balls that it took to say fuck it and put this together. But I I very much respect that the not I don't want to say it's reserved at all, but it articulated how well articulated and intentional it is. And I guess in the ways that it might have reservation is just in the areas where it could have turned into, just childish finger wagging, you know. So I 5 stars, everybody needs
Damn.
to
Oh,
grab a copy of Inversion. Uh the gay listeners, straight listeners, I mean this book I think is I would put it up there as one of the most important cultural discussions on uh art and life and wokeness and everything that we are experiencing right now with the whitewashing of culture with I mean immigration, even it affects everything. And this is really that's come out recently. It's the most important cultural critique that I've read in the past decade. So everyone everyone grab a copy. um what else would y'all like to plug for the
I'm
listeners
just going
before
to
we leave?
cry.
Yeah, I'm like
Can you
blushing and
marry? Can you
screaming.
marry me? Can you be my wife, please? Gosh, I'm incredibly. I think we're both incredibly touched. That's the most sort of delivered so hard, so full-heartedly that
And
I'm
actually, I think for
overwhelmed.
some
Thank you.
reason, this podcast is the one that made me most optimistic. Because I mean, I think I can speak for Pierre as well that we had enough about talking about the gays, and every time it kind of makes you a bit depressed. And I'm actually feeling kind of optimistic now.
Well, so the point is that if we leave straight men and straight women in charge of homosexuality, like it
It'll
used to
work.
be until about 1960, it's gonna be okay.
So
Thanks,
yeah,
Kelby. This is great.
Yeah,
fuck,
give me the reins of homosexuality and we'll be
you got it.
Oh, okay.
good.
Okay.
All right.
Ah.
We all be easy.